When Cheryl Watkins, a self-appointed HOA enforcer, tried to evict a black man from a quiet Atlanta suburb, she thought she was upholding neighborhood standards. What she didn't know was that the man, David Lawrence, wasn't just a resident. He was the landlord who owned her home. Her campaign of harassment backfired, exposing her prejudice and unraveling a web of HOA corruption that would leave her humiliated and the community transformed. David Lawrence, a 42-year-old black entrepreneur, moved to the Oakwood Estates subdivision in Roswell, Georgia, in January 2023. A real estate investor with a portfolio of 15 properties, David had built his wealth through strategic purchases during the 2008 housing crash. He owned several homes in Oakwood, including 214 Maple Drive, where he'd recently relocated to oversee his investments. David was reserved but friendly, a single father to his 16-year-old daughter, Zoe, who attended Roswell High School. His days were spent managing properties, mentoring young investors, and volunteering at a local youth center. Cheryl Watkins, 54, lived at 210 Maple Drive, a house David had purchased in 2019 and leased to her through a property management company. As president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association, Cheryl was known for her strict enforcement of rules she often bent for friends but wielded against those she deemed outsiders. She lived in Oakwood for a decade, priding herself on maintaining the neighborhood's image. Her emails to residents were infamous, filled with complaints about untrimmed lawns, loud music, or cars parked too long on the street. Trouble began in February 2023, when Cheryl noticed David working on his front yard at 214 Maple Drive. She assumed he was a tenant, not the owner, and sent him an HOA notice for unauthorized landscaping after he planted azaleas, without board approval. David, puzzled but professional, emailed her proof that he owned the property and had checked the HOA bylaws, which allowed minor landscaping. Cheryl didn't respond but began watching him closely, noting his comings and goings in a notebook she kept for neighborhood violations. By March, Cheryl escalated her campaign. She sent David a second notice, this time for excessive noise from Zoe's weekend basketball games in their driveway. David replied politely, explaining Zoe played during permitted hours and inviting Cheryl to discuss any concerns. Instead, Cheryl filed a formal HOA complaint, accusing David of disrupting the community's character. She also spread rumors at HOA meetings, suggesting David's frequent visitors, mostly business associates, were suspicious. Other board members, wary of Cheryl's influence, stayed silent. David, aware of the whispers, kept records of every interaction. His years in real estate had taught him to document everything, especially when dealing with bureaucracy. He installed a Ring camera at his front door after noticing Cheryl lingering near his property. The footage captured her inspecting his mailbox and photographing his car. David shared the videos with his lawyer, Aisha Patel, a friend who specialized in property law. Aisha advised him to attend the next HOA meeting to address Cheryl's accusations directly. The April 2023 HOA meeting was tense. Cheryl presented a petition, signed by 5 of her allies, demanding David's eviction for repeated violations. She claimed he was a renter who'd forged ownership documents, citing his failure to integrate into the community. David stood up, calm but firm, and presented his deed, tax records, and proof of ownership for 214 Maple Drive, and, to the room's shock, for Cheryl's home at 210 Maple Drive. The property management company had kept his identity anonymous, a common practice to avoid tenant bias. Cheryl's face drained of color as David explained he'd owned her home for 4 years, with her lease payments going directly to his LLC. The room erupted in murmurs. Cheryl, flustered, insisted David's documents were fake and demanded an emergency board vote to pursue his eviction. Aisha, present as David's counsel, pointed out that the HOA had no authority to evict a homeowner, especially not the landlord of the board president's residence. The meeting ended in chaos, with several residents questioning Cheryl's leadership. David left quietly, but the confrontation was just the beginning. Cheryl doubled down, sending David a certified letter threatening legal action for fraudulent ownership claims. She also posted in the neighborhood's private Facebook group, accusing David of infiltrating Oakwood to lower property values. The post went viral when a resident, tired of Cheryl's tactics, shared it publicly. The hashtag HOA Karen exploded on social media, with thousands condemning Cheryl's behavior. Local news outlets picked up the story, framing it as a case of racial bias in affluent suburbs. David, though shaken, saw an opportunity to expose deeper issues. He'd heard from tenants in his other Oakwood properties about Cheryl's selective enforcement, fining Black and Latino residents for minor infractions while ignoring similar violations by white neighbors. He began collecting statements from tenants and neighbors, including Maria Gomez, who'd been fined $500 for a cluttered porch, and Jamal Carter, who'd received warnings for parking his work van on the street. Both confirmed Cheryl's rules seemed to target minorities. Aisha filed a lawsuit against Cheryl and the HOA in May 2023, alleging discrimination, defamation, and abuse of power. The suit named Cheryl personally, citing her false accusations and harassment. David also sent Cheryl a notice through his property management company, informing her that her lease at 210 Maple Drive would not be renewed, giving her 60 days to vacate. Cheryl, enraged, refused to leave, claiming tenant rights and accusing David of retaliation. Aisha countersued, arguing Cheryl's actions voided her lease agreement. The case gained national attention, with outlets like CNN and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution covering the HOA Karen scandal. Activists rallied behind David, organizing protests outside Cheryl's home, holding signs reading "No More HOA Tyranny" and "Justice for David." Zoe, now 17, created a TikTok account to share their story, posting Ring camera clips of Cheryl's behavior. Her videos amassed millions of views, turning David into a symbol of resistance against discriminatory HOAs. In July 2023, the lawsuit went to court. Aisha presented a meticulous case: David's ownership records, Cheryl's harassing emails, tenant testimonies, and data showing Oakwood's fines disproportionately targeted minority residents. A neighbor, Tom Reynolds, testified that Cheryl had bragged about keeping the neighborhood a certain way, implying racial motives. Cheryl's defense claimed she was protecting property values and had no knowledge of David's ownership, but her notebook, subpoenaed as evidence, revealed entries labeling David as trouble and noting his race. The judge ruled in David's favor in August 2023, ordering Cheryl to pay $150,000 in damages for defamation and emotional distress. The HOA was fined $50,000 for failing to curb her actions and ordered to revise its bylaws to prevent discriminatory enforcement. Cheryl was removed as president, and the board was restructured with independent oversight. She vacated 210 Maple Drive by September, moving to a nearby apartment complex. Her reputation was ruined, with local businesses refusing her service after the scandal. David used his settlement to fund a community initiative, the Oakwood Unity Project, which provided legal aid to residents facing HOA disputes. He also renovated 210 Maple Drive, leasing it to Maria Gomez at a discounted rate. The HOA, under new leadership, implemented diversity training and transparent fining procedures. A 2024 audit showed a 70% reduction in resident complaints, and Oakwood became a model for HOA reform in Georgia. David continued his work, mentoring Zoe, who planned to study urban planning to address housing inequities. He spoke at real estate conferences, sharing his story to inspire investors to challenge unfair systems. Cheryl, meanwhile, faded from public view, her social media accounts deleted after relentless backlash. The neighborhood, once divided, began to heal, with residents forming a community watch group to ensure inclusivity. Janelle's public shaming of David was meant to assert her control, but it exposed her prejudice and cost her everything. David Lawrence, a man she underestimated, wasn't just a homeowner. He was a landlord, a father, and a catalyst for change. His fight reshaped Oakwood Estates, proving that no one, not even an HOA Karen, could wield power unchecked when truth and justice were on the other side.